You've represented the victims of the post office scandal. You've been involved with the families killed in the Manchester Arena bombing.
I grew up with my grandparents. Very typical sort of working class. You work hard, you have ambition, and you do it honestly and with integrity. I hope, but I don't believe. And as we've gone along that journey, that belief has grown. You now will start to expect to win rather than hope to win.
The People Performance Podcast is made up of 3 series. First up, we have the Leader Lounge episodes with founder of T2, Martin Johnson. Then we have the guest interview episodes. And finally, we have our performance episodes delivered by our very own T2 consultants. For now, sit back, tune in and enjoy the People Performance Podcast.
So welcome to the People Performance Podcast with me, Martin Johnson, and my special guest today, Neil Hudgell. Neil, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. Yeah, good.
Ready for this? Are you a veteran at podcasting?
I've done a bit. Yeah, I've done a bit.
So I've got Neil for about 45 minutes because he wants to go to the gym and have a full workout, which is typical Neil. So let's use the time wisely. Neil, it's great to have you. We always have guests here on the podcast, from people with a military background to a business background, different types of leaders. We've had sports athletes in here. And it's great to have you in the podcast room today. Let's start, not at the beginning, but let's start a little bit earlier on, actually. So you, I'm guessing, Hull born and bred.
East Hull born and bred, yeah.
Whereabouts in East Hull?
Place Maybury Drive, which is sort of Junction Ings Road, Holness Road. So right in the centre. Grew up with my grandparents. Very typical sort of working class upbringing.
Was you a working class East Hull?
Yeah.
Was you academic? Did you do well at school?
No, my school reports were always can do better, easily distracted. But I think people, if you read between the lines, I think the reports were essentially teachers that were frustrated that I had more potential than I actually delivered. But I'm showing my age, nearly 60. So it was all about sport. Everybody loved sport. So academia was a bit of a distraction from getting out and getting on the playing field and kicking a football or rugby ball around. So those were sort of childhood distractions. So it was a little bit, going to school was a bit of a sideshow.
Easily distracted. Would you say that is still the case today at 60 now?
1,000%. Yeah, I live in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
So, I've been a lawyer for the best part of 30 years and incredibly, I would say that my ability to retain information and for attention to detail has never changed. It's not great, but I think one of the key things for me is that I surround myself with people that can do that, and that that's essential. We all have sort of complementary skill sets, and part of that is that we have people in business, in the sports club, that do detail. I don't. I try and stick to the high level stuff.
Absolutely. And there's a bit of a common denominator with people I interview and I work with around entrepreneurs and CEOs. And it's then most of them are attention deficit, including myself. We will laugh behind the camera, but, the staying on task and on track in one thing for a duration of time is difficult. We like to move and spin lots of plates and be involved with lots of different things because that keeps the attention and the energy. But you're right, having the right pillars, I call them, underneath you is essential in business, isn't it? It's absolutely essential. So, 1997, you established Hudgell Solicitors. When I first sort of prepared for this, I was thinking I expected it to be a bit earlier than 1997. I mean, that is still obviously a long time ago, but I'm guessing you worked for organisations and firms before that and then decided to take the plunge in 1997. Is that correct?
Yeah, the circumstances at the time, really. So as a lawyer, you got to go through a sort of fairly protracted, torturous training regime, and at the end of that, you got to work for somebody for so long before you can have a go yourself. And really, when I had a go myself, was about the first time I could do it. So I had to be employed by a law firm for 3 years, and it was literally 3 years and a few weeks. And circumstances presented themselves. Basically, the firm was failing, and they needed to shed some costs. So I took a couple of offices from them on the ultimatum: you either take this or you're redundant. And it was And it was frightening at the time, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I've not looked back since. You know, I opened on the day after Princess Diana died, so I know that date sort of fairly well etched. And I've been my own boss ever since.
And what a journey it's been. I mean, we're going to come on to Hull KR in a short while, but some of the high-profile cases and clientele you have been involved in is phenomenal, really. You know, you've represented the victims of the post office scandal. You've been involved with the families killed in the Manchester Arena bombing. You've represented the families of 4 young men who were murdered by the serial killer Stephen Port. And you've even been involved with the families and survivors of the Grenfell Tower disaster. I mean, they are some of the most high-profile cases the UK have seen. Like a lad from Hull, from East Hull, who was set up in 1997. How do you go from small little office solicitors firm to where you are today and being involved in those type of cases?
Well, I think you don't compromise your principles, do you? And I've always been a strong believer that law's not difficult. There's always somebody who'll know the technicalities of some law better than I will, 100%. It's about relationships. It's about building relationships, and essentially, that's what I feel I'm pretty decent at. So I look after people, and that again comes from a basic grounding. You know, the victims of Stephen Port, the victims of Manchester, the victims of the post office scandal are no different to you and I. They're ordinary folk. They go about the day. The difference is that they've come across disaster and catastrophe that we haven't. And at that point in their lives, they need somebody to help them and to come to terms with that and to get answers and accountability. And that's us. But we start that by building a rapport and building a relationship. Again, because, you know, I know if I'm sat in front of a doctor, I know if I'm sat in front of another professional, immediately you get in your mind, you know, if you've got confidence in that person or if they know what they're doing. And it's in the same way, if I've got someone that's so heavily traumatized, first thing, you know, I do is I want to know from them what it is that they want. And very often, they want answers, they want accountability, but they want to be looked after. And they want to talk about football, and they want to talk about the weather, and they want to talk about what they cook for tea, or they want to talk about family relationships. They don't want to really get into the traumatic stuff. They want that to be taken care of for them. And that's what it's about. So take the post office, for example. I had one client, and that client was a lady called Jo Hamilton that was in the drama. But Jo's a very influential client within the sub-postmasters group. So built a relationship with Jo. We're really good friends now. You know, I go and see her horses. She does stupid things like rides horses in her late 60s. So I go and see her horses in where she lives in the southeast. And we chat about stuff. But Jo was my first client. We got on. She introduced me to 5 more, introduced me to 10 more, introduced me to... So that ripple effect goes from 1 to eventually to 1,000. And you replicate that across different work streams or different different situations. So Martin Hibbett, who was the closest survivor to the Manchester Arena blast, another personal friend of mine. I'm having dinner with him next week, similar sort of way. You know, I've been to football with him, and people like in my profession, because my profession's still got a little bit of snootiness about it. It's still got it's all pinstripe suits, process driven. You know, you come to me, I'm sat behind a desk, that sort of thing. They don't quite get the trick, and the trick is the people.
I was going to say, Neil, you're anything but the pinstripe suit and the briefcase and the snootiness. You know, you walk around in shorts and running shoes and sports rig most of the time, right? But
well, it's deliberate. You know, it's deliberate because, you know, I put myself in their shoes. I've been in situations. You know, I came from a very working class background. No one had been in the professions. We trusted professional people. We were in awe of professional people. We were intimidated by them. So suit and tie to people that are not used to that environment can be quite intimidating, particularly when, you know, you've been let down by the institutions. So again, post office, you're let down by one of the biggest brands in the country that's government backed. You're then let down by the justice system. So what in those circumstances, 20 years on, you're then presented by someone like me that's in the suit and tie. Where's your initial instincts going to go?
Yeah.
You're going to go to actually, can I trust these people? So you need to sort of demystify that. You need to get people in a good space. So the roundabout way to answer the initial question you asked is, where do we get all this high profile work from? It starts with one, but it starts with doing it right. It starts with being trusted, so that contacts like MPs, we have all sorts of good relationships with MPs. MPs tend to be the first place people go when they've got an injustice that they want to bring to public's attention. MPs will only give me stuff to look at if they know that it's a safe pair of hands. But once you've done something well once, it sort of then amplifies and multiplies into something else.
Absolutely. Yeah, get that. Question then. As you know, at T2, we are a leadership development organisation. We work with a lot of companies on leadership and building cultures. You've clearly done that within Hudgell, but also within Hull KR. It's a massive question, but what would be some of the things and principles you've hung your hat on over the years around building cultures and with leadership in your organisations? What's your philosophy style?
Yeah, I mean, again, I won't seek to dumb it down, but for me, it's quite simple. First thing I start with is work ethic, work hard, and then it's about authenticity, integrity, and truth. If you work hard and you're honest, then for me, anything else is forgivable. We have a really open culture at Hudgell's around mistakes. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes every day. I think the difference between a mistake I make today and one I made 20 years ago is, I've got a level of maturity and experience that knows that most mistakes can be remedied, or at least can be minimised. It's the old adage: if you dig a hole, stop digging. So we encourage that. So you work hard, you have ambition, and you do it honestly and with integrity, then everything else follows. I think the other thing, Martin, that I've learned over the years is that I don't have all the answers. I'm not. There are better people in positions that can do a far better job than me with certain things. And as soon as you sort of comfortable with that, it just explodes from there, really.
Yeah, we talk a lot to leadership teams and organisations around dynamic subordination. It's this concept of, it doesn't matter what your level of command authority or rank is, you have to be willing to dynamically subordinate to someone more junior than you if they carry the expertise, the experience, or they have the right answer. And for leaders, quite often that's a tough thing to do, because we sometimes think we've got to be all things to all people, we've got to have an opinion, or sometimes we do think we have a predefined way of doing something. So to subordinate and say, do you know what, you might be right, or you make a good point, it's not a common thing. But I guess what you're saying there is get out of people's way sometimes and let them do their jobs. Empower them to do what you're paying them to do.
Yeah, I think you learn that from experience. I mean, I would sort of like, if I give you a couple of examples of that in the rugby club, it would probably be demonstrative of that. So one I can think of, the two really good examples. So one, Rovers got relegated.
So just on this, Neil, you took over the club in what year?
I became chairman in 2004. I mean, I was a ball boy as a kid, a sponsor, legal advisor, jumped on the board. Everybody jumped off. I became chairman in 2004. So 20-ish years ago, major shareholder much later than that. And it's been the club was a roller coaster.
Yeah. So you took over in 2004. Were they still in the first division?
Bottom end of the second tier, which would be called the first division.
Yes.
But with a second tier. So playing in front of about 1,200 people.
1,200 people. From the dynasty of the 80s to that, it was, would you say, possibly the lowest the club got to around that time there?
somewhere around there, yeah, because they were in administration, they were teaching, there was talk of the merger with Hull over the other side of the river. And of course, and up to this year, I've always measured OKR as an entity against the team of the 70s and 80s when I started going, you see. So it was all, I was a kid and it was great and we won trophies every year. And it was like, is this it? Does this always be like this? And obviously it wasn't always like that. But everything I did from 2004 to this last year has been measured against that. And there's always fallen short. Whatever we've done, it's always fallen short. So it's been peaks and troughs during that journey. But so as I say, one of the troughs was relegation 2016. The guy who ran the commercial arm of the club at the time, Craig Franklin, came to me and said, I think we should do some form of sort of dynamic discretionary pricing for next year. We've gone down and we should let people pay what they want to pay. And I'm like, yeah, it's mad. But for some reason, I let him have his head on it. And the upshot of it was that most people actually paid more. So we dropped down the level and sponsors, supports and what have you, paid more. So we actually did better than we did when we were in the Elite League. And that was a real time lesson to me that actually I don't always know right. I'm not always the right one. So that was one really good example. And another really good example was when we did the club rebrand 2 or 3 years ago. You'll know sports clubs, their fans, their tradition, their heritage. Dabbling with a badge, dabbling with a name, it is a recipe for a whole barrage of toxicity, negativity, all that sort of stuff. So it's got to be really handled sensitively. And the red and white 3 crowns has always emotionally been a tie for me. But we did this rebrand and it has had, I would say, like a 90% positive reaction. Incredible. Again, nothing to do with me. Craig's brainchild in conjunction with whoever's designed it. And what it's done is absolutely galvanised the club. I know we've been successful on the pitch, but we've also changed the dynamic on the audience because rugby league, one of rugby league's challenges over recent years has been an ageing demographic of my type of age and categorisation. You're male 50s, 60s, getting older and older. And of course, eventually we'll run out and there's, the younger audience behind it wasn't there. It's there now.
Yeah.
This club support is in ever increasing numbers. It is a more complex dynamic than saying it's just down to a rebrand, but a rebrand that was delivered so successfully is sort of a core fundamental of how that's come about. So there's a couple of examples of where I don't know better.
Yeah. Yes, they're great examples, and monitoring OKR's journey over the last probably particularly 5 years, you can see all those things that have contributed to the success on the pitch as well. Like you say, obviously you've got to assemble a fantastic playing team, a great coach, a good philosophy. You've got to have all those things. But yeah, I see how the rebrand decision has gone into that. Fast forward to this last year. So you've come from the 90s, the early 2000s, the low point, the 1,200 a week. You had then like a journey through the 2000s where you got back into the top flight, albeit it was still a journey, but you were pushing forward. And then it's been a bit of a roller coaster because you sort of made progress. And then I think it was, you correct me, Neil, it was what year was the relegation year, the Millpam game?
2015 was Wembley when we lost 50-0.
Yeah.
That was actually the lowest point for me.
Was it?
Yeah, just pride.
Yeah, of course.
I don't think anyone cared enough, apart from me. And a few, that's a bit of a generalisation, but a few others, but there weren't enough people. But that was cultural. The recruitment of some of the people into the club, they just didn't buy into it, didn't share the same philosophies as the people that was on the terraces, didn't care enough. And that's my fault. That's the people in the club's fault for doing that. So that was the lowest. And then 16 was relegation. 17 we got straight back up. And then we sort of toyed around the bottom a little bit for another 3 or 4 years. COVID actually was an opportunity to reset the club. bizarrely, COVID was turned out to be quite positive.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. You don't have to answer this, Neil, but I'm going to ask it anyway. There was obviously reports that at one of those points in those years, you were ready to potentially say, let me hand it to somebody else. Let me potentially, have I done enough? Is it time for me to sell it and move on, or whatever it might be? But you didn't. But was the truth in that? Was you considering that? At some
Yeah.
point in those
No,
years?
100%. I'm all, I'm the major shareholder in the club. Down the years we've put a lot in there, but ultimately I'm a custodian, and I still feel I'm a custodian. And so if someone knocked on the door tomorrow and had a better proposition than what we're doing, then we'd consider it. So it's not a personal fiefdom or anything like that. It's a responsibility that has hung very heavily sometimes in that journey. And as you might imagine, there's always going to be pinch points where you think, I'm exhausted from this. I can't take this any further. This is me done. I need to find somebody that can actually do it justice. And 2019, 2020 was a point when it was like,
So around the COVID years.
yeah, around the COVID years. But then, a few things happened. And I guess sometimes you got to stay in the journey for your luck to change. And I think,
What was the turning point then? Because obviously last year, 2025, treble winners.
yeah.
I just said to you off camera before you came in, like, this season's really interesting, because which we'll come to wrap up at the end. But treble winners, like, only a few clubs have ever done that. Number one graded club in the RFL's eyes on the grading system. Everything is just, you've reached the pinnacle type thing. So what was the turning point between you deciding, no, I am going to stay in 2020, and the treble in 2025?
A lot in that.
Yeah,
I'll try and answer it in 60 seconds, shall I? So people, personnel, and circumstance. So COVID came, and the finances were able to be reset because of a few things that happened as a consequence of COVID. We then brought in, Tony Smith came in and started a cultural change within the playing group. He didn't stay around, but Paul Lakin came back as chief exec. Now, Paul's professional in sport. Our sport is not rich with people that are both good at their job but also understand sport. Paul's a bit of a one-off. So he left. He was around at the start of my journey in the early 2000s, but he left to go to football, and he cut his teeth well in football. But circumstances led him to taking the decision, actually, I want to move back to the north. And so we had a conversation. He came in, and instantly I had somebody that I could trust implicitly. I think sometimes you get fortunate that you've people that think like you think, and actually one step ahead of you. So I would raise stuff with Paul, and Paul would already be on with it. Gives you a real measure of sort of comfort and confidence. So Paul came. Tony started a process that then Willie, then when he came in at the end of 2022, took on to a whole new level. And again, that was about culture, building a team that replicated the identity of the people that stood on the terraces. So honest.
Can I put, because I'm interested, because obviously we work on culture with sports teams. We work with Tour de France teams, Manchester United. We're involved in some big projects. But what for you, if you used to pick out a couple of fundamentals that are important to the culture of a sports team and a club to drive that success, would you be willing to share a couple of things that you just think, like, we've really done a good job of that?
Well, I just think I think when I observe, and our job as a board, because obviously there's more to the answer about why we're successful. So we bring a board of directors in. Paul Sewell comes in as chairman, brings in a sort of overlays a more sort of corporate decision-making framework, brings in good people. We're not corporate as such, but there's accountability there. There's measurability and accountability. We go in the dressing room, we stand in a corner and watch. Our voices aren't there to be heard. We're there to watch. And if someone wants to come to us to talk about something, they'll do that. We're there, we're available, we're there to support, but it's a sort of quiet discreet support. But I watch and I observe, and what I watch and observe is a few things. There's an ethic again, everybody works hard. Everybody, all arrows point north. Everybody points in the same direction. But people are held to account. They're held to account by their peers. The coach can only do so much. The coach sets the standards. The captain buys into it. The senior players group buy into it. Then everybody is held to account. The young kids are held to account by Minnie. They're held to account by Jez, Batch. It's them that set the standards. And then I think once you start to hold people to account and you build a momentum, it becomes irresistible. So at the start of Willie's journey, I remember having a conversation, and sometimes Willie asks me to speak to the player, sometimes he doesn't, and I'm quite happy not to. At the end of the day, I've never played the sport at elite level. He might ask me to speak once a year. That's great, he's taking care of stuff. I'm not offended by it. But I remember when we first started the journey, I said to the group, what this is about is belief. And what I mean by that is I would go to games, play the bigger clubs, hoping to win, but feeling at some point in that 80 minutes, they'd pop over the top and beat us. And so I sort of said, right, beginning this journey, my level of belief is at 2 out of 10. So I hope, but I don't believe. And as we've gone along that journey, that belief has grown. So 23, Willie's first season, we win the Challenge Cup final. We were favourites to win it. We lost to Lee in Golden Point. End of that season, 5 out of 10. Come the next year, we get to the grand final. We lose to Wigan. I knew we weren't quite good enough. They were the better team. Beliefs at 7 out of 10. Then obviously as we get into the beginning of this year, we recruit Jared. Last year, sorry. We recruit Jared, we recruit Mickey McAlore, and both older guys in the mid-30s that bring a bit more belief because they've been around the block and done it all, and that just, that just ripples through the team. So you move your 7 to 9, you win the cup, you then, you win the league leaders, and then you win the grand final. So your belief becomes 9.5, and you now will start to expect to win rather than hope to win. So it's that sort of incremental journey, but it sort of starts by getting the right people in with the right ethic. Willie understood, he's got this thing about us being representative of the people that are out on the terraces, and that really runs through the core of the club.
Love it. I've got 2 more questions for you, Neil, because I want to get done in the next 7 minutes on time. 2 final questions. And I'm looking forward to your answer on the last one as a Hull FC fan. Okay. So,
you kept that quiet.
So we do these days. So we're going into 2026. It's been an amazing journey from a Hull KR perspective, from a Hudgell perspective. You're now at the top of the mountain, treble winners, #1 grade league club. Like, how do you psych yourself up for what next? You're a 9.5 out of 10. How do you, what's the view of going right? Because sometimes the psychology around this could be, well, the only way is down. We could win the double this year. We've done worse than last year. Obviously, you can't think like that. But what's the focus? How do you keep that appetite and ambition from this point where you've basically achieved everything you've been trying to achieve for these years?
Well, I think there's a few things in there. I don't think you look at it as trophies, do you? You look at it day by day, week by week, doing your best. Because I've always had the view, if you go through your processes, the rest takes care of itself. Trophies are just the reward for the work that you've done. I equally think you always want more, and you need to sense check where your position is really. And what I mean by that is we've had one very good year. One sort of legacy year, but it's 1 year. Wigan won successive league titles. Saints won 4 on the trot. We don't compare with them. And I think we'd like to compare with them, which is obviously very much easier said than done. So there is a significant amount to carry on going at. and the whole mentality is about, emulating last year and going one step beyond if we can. 4 clubs have won the treble, and I think in the following season only one of those 4 clubs actually won anything. So it's a real big step up to even emulate any of that. So that's that. It's about a legacy born of a dynasty rather than this is a one season wonder.
Dynasty.
Essentially,
The old blacks have this saying, don't they, where they say that the better you get, the harder it is to get better. But that's where true legacy comes from, and that's where that culture of winning comes from.
Well, I think what I'd sum it up in a couple of things. If you talk about, say, Willie, for example. So we won the Challenge Cup. The following week we played French at home, and we're 50-something points up with about 5 minutes to go. Again, Willie's got a lot of basic philosophies around, if you've got the ball, it's yours, and you've got to be respectful of that. Don't give it away cheaply. Well, we're 50 points up with a few minutes to go. He's in his box, and I'm in the director's box. I can hear through. It's not soundproof. Kids love it because he can be very colourful in what he says, and they take him off in a very great Australian twang. Young lad kicks ahead on about the third tackle, unscripted, just off his own back, and he absolutely goes ballistic. We're 50 points up, and he's going ballistic that somebody has done something off script. Real attention to detail. Second thing, we win the grand final. The following morning, he's talking about how we can be better this year. The following morning, within hours of us winning the grand final, it's about what can we do to be better next year. And that sums us up.
That's when you got a laugh first.
Yeah, 100%.
So, last question. I'm an UFC fan. My son is, who's 11. He's obviously grown up and started to really watch rugby in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, which, as we know, have been a tough time for, let's say, transitional time. So he's all of his friends are Hull KR fans. They're all having the most amazing time, going to finals, winning trophies. And he's looking at me going, why are we all FC fans, Dav? And I try and say to him, it hasn't always been like this, number one. And it won't always be like this. But right now, you've entered the rugby world at a time where our team are having to work it out, right? We're having to reset, start again. You've been there. We've had Rovers fans who have had years. It's interesting because my mate's lad, he's their Rovers, and he's the opposite. He's like, we're the best team in the world, and his dad's saying to him, it hasn't always been like this, son. You're just very lucky that you've come into it at this point. So I guess my last question to you, Neil, would be, I'm trying to motivate my son to keep the faith, right, and that it will come again. What other advice can I give him? He's like I say, he's only ever experienced the challenge over the last 3 or 4 seasons.
I don't think there's any advice you can give him, can you? Because ultimately we're born into it. It's really interesting because my attitude on all this has changed down the years. When I first came in as chairman, I was a little bit too rabid in the intensity of the rivalry between the two clubs, and maybe not as respectful as I am about it, because we're as important to as we are to each other. Equally, you're right. We've been a long time at the bottom, and Hull had a lot of time at the top. That can turn very quickly. So we need to be respectful of that. I will never be critical of anybody that supports our club for crowing as loud as they do at the minute. But it can change, and the dial for Hull is very much going that way again, I think. And I've outwardly said a few times, if we can get back to where we were 40 years ago, where it's 1 and 2, as long as we're 2, then as long as we're 1 and you're 2, I'm fine with that. But I think it's wonderful that your boy's following you, because he'll follow you because you're his dad, and that I follow my granddad, and my grandkids are following me, so I have the same conversations. A little bit in reverse to you, I'm saying to them as they lead the team out at Old Trafford and Wembley, as they've done and will do it at KCON, or MKM as it's now called. in a few weeks' time. It's not always going to be like this, but it's not a question of choice, and sometimes it's not a question of enjoyment. It genuinely is. I think what you're born into, and it's part of like, I don't think you'd enjoy. So maybe tell him you can't enjoy the trophies and the successes unless you understand the hard stuff as well.
Do you know what? We're going to finish this on this because it's an interesting point. I said to him once, I went, the reason Hull KR fans are so ecstatic now, absolutely on cloud nine, are coming in their masses, singing the loudest that they've ever sang, is because they've been from a place where it was tough. They've endured the suffering for years, which makes the success so much more enjoyable. So I say to him, so you see, son, in 3, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it might be, we go to a final, we win a trophy, you will love it so much more because you'll remember the times where it was suffering and it wasn't so good. But he's 11 and he's like, well, okay,
He's just got to trust the process, hasn't he? He's got to trust his dad. It's as simple as that, really.
And if not, we support them anyway, right? It's that you picked, you've made your choice.
Exactly that.
Neil, I could speak to you all day, mate. I'm going to let you go because I know you're keen to get on with your day. Really inspiring story. Some real good stuff in there about journeys and cultures and empowerment and stepping away and not getting in people's way at times. And I think there's probably a lot to take from that. It would be great probably at some point to get you back in, probably because we could probably talk about a lot more. But other than that, thank you very much, Neil.
It's been a pleasure.
Good luck for the season.
Thank you.
I sort of mean that.
Apart from 3 times, I guess.
Well, I'm actually going to Vegas because we love to go to Vegas each year and watch the NRL, and obviously you guys are there this year, and so I'll be in Vegas.
We'll have a pint then.
We'll have a pint if we can catch up, and then hopefully, I think on the horizon, Hull are going to be there next year, the year after.
That's the plan, yeah.
That's the plan. But thank you, Neil Hudgell, and we'll be back again shortly with another People Performance podcast.
Cheers, mate.
The People Performance Podcast, brought to you by T2.